Hi, I'm Lucas Miller. Welcome back to Tea Time in Olympia. My guest today is Boudicca Walsh, radical trans witch.
Yes.
And recently chair of Thurston County Democrats.
Yes.
Until very recently, I understand.
Very recently, yes.
So thank you for being on the show with us today.
Thank you.
And why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you, your background, how long have you been in the Olympia area, a little bit about your identity and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Boudicca Walsh, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a gender fluid trans woman who lives here in Olympia. I've lived in the area for about 7 years, but various different parts of it.
Mm-hmm. Where did you come from?
So actually I came from upstate New York. I have, full disclosure, I have never actually been to New York City, but I really feel like I love upstate. There's a lot, where I come from is Rochester, which is actually a pretty urban area. It has a lot of history to it.
Yeah.
And I left there back in 2010, so it's been quite a journey.
Well, it's good to have another East Coaster on the show.
Thanks.
Yeah. So what brought you to Olympia?
Well, in all honesty, I kind of needed a fresh start. I was in a very bad relationship, and right around the time that broke down, it was the sort of thing where my entire support structure kind of disintegrated. And so I needed a fresh start. So I moved out here, and it took me about 3 years to actually find kind of a stable living situation. Because throughout that time, I was in bad living situation after bad living situation, and now things are going okay. But
Good.
It's been an interesting journey.
So tell us a little bit more about your coming out process.
Which one?
Well.
I feel like it's a lifelong thing, truly.
Yeah.
Because years ago, actually when I had first just moved out here, I was only identifying as queer. Back in high school, I only really knew that I was gay. But now I am a out and proud trans person. I'm very queer, and I'm also mentally ill. I like to be open about that because I feel like there's a lot of stigma associated with that.
Right.
And the only real way that we've ever, at least from my queer perspective, that we've actually been able to overcome stigma is to actually have these kind of frank conversations about it.
Yeah.
So it's been a long process, and it's something that I keep having to do. As I'm sure you and any other trans person watching is aware, it's especially for being trans and queer, because those sorts of identities are very secretive. It's something that you're going to be doing throughout your life.
Sure.
Every new workplace, every social situation, honestly, I have to reestablish, and then I have to kind of make that decision, do I come out here? Do I talk about this?
Right. Yeah. Well, for activists such as us, that's a big part of our identity, I think, is talking about who we are and being very open in situations where maybe not everybody would be comfortable being open. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you have some history as an activist.
It's something that started back in high school. I remember going actually to Albany, which is the capital of New York, and going down to the Congress building. We were pushing at the time for GENDA, with GENDA, which was Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act.
Yeah.
There had been a lot of push from New York LGBTQIA communities for protections for everyone under the umbrella.
Yeah.
The compromise that we had gotten before I got involved was that same-sex relationships was protected, but nothing else was.
Right.
And what really struck me that whole time was how ignorant a lot of people within the gay, lesbian, and bi, cis community were as to why we were there, why it was important that we were asking for this.
Yeah.
I literally had someone say, well, why are they even in our pride parades? Are they really part of our community?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was frustrating because the same large groups like Human Rights Campaign and other large social justice groups basically dropped out once those same-sex protections came in. And just like we saw when, nationally we finally had marriage like legalized, equal marriage, tons of people like disappeared from the movement because they're like, we've won, everybody, we're done. There was a period of several years where I honestly kind of went out of that activism. I've always been very passionate. Throughout my life, I've often been told and identify as an idealist. And of course, so naturally, that's going to give one sort of an activist bent.
Oh, yeah.
2015, 2016, the political process and really hoping for some real change. And, I got involved with Thurston County Progressives.
Yeah.
And I was helping facilitate meetings. I was, meeting, asking local progressive activists and politicians, office holders to come and speak.
Right.
Pushing for, more social justice.
Right.
And I also became involved with Just Housing. And right now I'm kind of looking at getting back re-involved in activism. When I was the chair of Thurston County Democrats, my main job was facilitating and representing the body of Thurston County Democrats, voters and members and precinct committee officers.
Okay.
My hope, and I talked about this on the night I ran, was that we would open the party to all of these political interest groups. Like Thurston County actually is a hugely politically active community.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of I like to think of it as a neighborhood of communities of political activism.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem really is that each group is so focused on its own thing, is that it's weirdly difficult to kind of create that kind of interconnected, intersectional resistance to, the forces that brought Trump about.
Yes.
Effectively.
Right.
So my hope was that by entering into the Democratic Party, I was part of that Dem-Enter movement, and we weren't looking to so much as to become part of the Democratic Party as we were to change the party from within. That was the goal. And to use the mechanisms of the party to better serve the people. I wanted it to become a more open group. I wanted it to be a place where Green Party members, socialists, people who are part of Black liberation movements, immigrant rights, trans rights, groups to be able to come in and be heard, and I can actually, as a group, say together, what are we going to do? I feel now that I've been on this planet for like 3 decades, a sense of urgency that I had not felt before. I think that I honestly, and maybe there's other people out there.
Well, I think everybody felt that after the election, right? I mean,
Yeah. I remember, I will never forget actually watching that. I was in my parents' house. It was actually the last time that I will ever be in my parents' house. My mom was seeing her first grandchild get born, and Dad was off doing a job. Anyway, I was sitting there and I was watching it. I was drinking a lot because it just was like this horror movie that just you could not wake up from.
Well.
And for the first, I had about a week there. And for the first couple days, I just felt absolutely empty. Like, how could this happen? Like, I mean, now I feel like, honestly, it's very clear why this has all happened.
Yeah.
But I came to with this kind of, like, I can either sit here and just accept this, or I can fight this, and I've decided to fight it. As chair of Thurston County Democrats, I wanted to kind of bring that same fire. I really wanted to bring the party back to the people.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot, in all of the meetings I've been at with Democrats, it almost always comes up. How are we going to get people involved in the political process?
Yeah.
And here in Thurston County, I honestly feel like you're more likely to find people who, in some ways, are. Even if they tell you that they hate politics and they don't want to talk politics, everyone here definitely has a strong political opinion,
Yeah.
regardless of what camp you fall in.
I suspect most people hate politics, but that's no excuse for not getting involved.
Well, the thing is that
Wow.
even if one is not, we know for a fact that the people who are benefiting from this chaos, this class warfare, this struggle for my generation to be able to get out of student debt, to be able to survive, honestly.
Right.
Though the people who are benefiting from the situation are in politics. And while I'm not saying that we should all become good Democrats, and I'm not going to say that at all, honestly, what we should be is involved
Right.
in some way. It's not enough to just kind of, I think, and this was true when I was younger. I've always been an avid voter, but when I was younger, I voted because I really felt like I want someone to come and fix these problems. Someone,
Right.
there's things wrong in the world. Someone should come and do something.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen that way.
No.
And in fact, it's that kind of attitude that has resulted in this.
So as chair, you did a lot of meeting facilitation, and
Yes.
it sounds like the main aim was to recenter the voices of the marginalized.
Yes.
And to reform the Democratic Party. How do you feel that went? I mean, you just recently stepped down as chair. Looking back, how do you feel were those efforts well spent, or?
So when I went in, I honestly did not really even look at the state or nationally. I feel like both parties are completely corrupt. Like
Yeah.
they're completely, like the people who are our representatives aren't even really the people who have the power, because it's the people behind them, the elected chairs of the party, and the people behind them who have the money, and the people behind them who are giving those lobbyists their money.
Right.
But what my hope was that within this county, because in this county and in this very small, Thurston County feels like a big place, but from that grander scale kind of thing, we
Yeah.
do have much more of a say. What your vote for your local office goes so much further
Yeah.
than for national office. My hope was that, when I saw someone like me take the helm, so to speak,
Yeah.
that folks would come in, and I did see some of that. Honestly, some of the best participation I saw was from some of these outside parties who stepped in. We've had a lot of successes, and I don't want to take this for myself. Honestly, the biggest things that we as Thurston County Democrats should be proud of is the House's Bill of Rights, which was a document that was originally written by local houseless people. It was a document that was started by Just Housing, and I was so enthused by it that I gave it to the body, and I said, could we please endorse this? Because this is, Thurston County Democrats has said and honestly has done quite a bit. Definitely not as much as some. And there's still way more to be done.
Oh, yeah.
But that night where we voted to endorse that, to a man, we had 100% of the vote. There was only one person who voted against, but it was down at the Olympia Film Society.
Okay.
But that's where we used to have meetings last year. And the house was packed, and seeing all of those hands come up, it's one of those moments that from this whole experience I'm going to take with me forever.
Yeah.
We also saw a lot of third-party candidates last year get endorsed by us, like Renata Rollins, for example, who is a Green Party member.
Yeah. And who we've had as a guest on the show.
Yes, and we endorsed her. That was a very easy sell.
Yeah.
when we were doing the burger booth last year, I want to say I'm very attached to the burger booth. I like.
We have the burger booth every year at Pride, and we're very attached to them too.
Yes, what I like about it is that it isn't some kind of elitist drinking party or social event. It's like
Right.
we're meeting directly with the community, the common people, people who are on my level, and we are. And we're serving food, good food, at a very reasonable price,
Yep.
and fundraising from that. And we had we outraised people from 2016
Wow.
throughout the year, which was, considering that was a presidential election where you're going to see more people coming to support a political party. I feel like that says something. We had some amazing volunteers. We passed probably the most progressive platform that this county party, maybe even any party in this state, has had. There were some elements that I wanted to push for, like the abolition of prisons and the police, that didn't get through. But they didn't get through committee. But I will say that I'll take the successes that we've had, and we improved upon something that was already a pretty progressive document from 2016.
And probably planted some seeds for the future, I dare say, just by bringing up those issues.
Yes. I feel like where our county party and where I failed is that we weren't able. I wasn't able to get the groups that I had wanted to get in, and what I did not count on was that as much as I am a very radical leftist person, that even people who consider themselves progressive are not necessarily. I remember not saying the pledge, and Colin Kaepernick and his protest of the Pledge of Allegiance had kind of gone back into the news cycle. And I was like, we talk all the time about how we as Democrats need to better serve communities of color. And so I had said at one meeting, hey, we're going to. We had been asked this. This had been a suggestion from one of the members. And they had suggested, why don't we just skip the pledge next meeting and not say anything about it? And I was like, okay, but it would be stronger if we said something. And so that meeting, I said, tonight we are going to not say the Pledge of Allegiance, and we're doing this in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, and all those who have been under the oppression of the American flag and and America, which I don't know if you or your viewers are aware, but it's quite an extensive list, even of people who've lived here, and not to least mention Native lives. The Native peoples whose land we've taken from them, and who our programs still ignore and are still kept in relative poverty because of, and still are being persecuted, going missing, being murdered, and of course, no one cares. So the fallout from that was honestly not what I expected. I had people whom I had done, tons of sweat equity with, or who I'd been in the steaming hot, loud burger booth for weeks at a time with. I actually took time off of my job at the I was there throughout that entire year for the burger booth. And I'm glad I did. It was an amazing experience being able to work right alongside my members, but seeing how some folks took it really kind of gave me a shock. I was called disingenuous. People said that because of my decision, I was corrupt. Someone said that I had denied them their right to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes, and then when I kind of talked to them, let's like as this person is white. How do you feel like about whether or not the rights of people of color have been
Exactly.
denied by
Yeah,
this
yeah.
pledge, by this flag, and also especially considering who the administration of the flag is currently representing.
Exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
really. And it really shocked me that people who I had thought as so progressive, and I guess maybe this is why I don't identify as progressive anymore, is because I feel like it has lost its meaning.
Yeah.
When you have people who are effectively centrists and very pro-capitalist
Yeah.
and very pro-status quo, saying that they're progressive just because they're in favor of business unions.
They mean that they're making progress in all the wrong directions.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's like, I've gotten to a point where I've realized that there is a lot of people who want change, but that's a very amorphous concept.
Yeah.
And they don't understand
Yeah.
that for us to really move forward, for us to
Yeah.
really get the things we want, we need to be considering and pushing for radical changes.
Yes.
Because it's,
And the right kind of radical
and the right kind of
changes.
radical
Yeah.
changes. Because we're seeing it happening very quickly. We're seeing
Yeah.
this national slide toward fascism.
Oh, yes.
And I'm very clear about that. Like what we're seeing currently is the American Reich. We have prison camps again.
Yeah.
We have families being separated.
Yeah.
We have
Increasing theocracy.
increasing
Yeah.
theocracy. We
Yeah.
and as a queer person.
Oh, yeah.
And as a trans person, and as
Yeah.
a poor trans person who's also mentally ill, like,
Yeah.
I'm grateful for my white privilege because at the very least that means that I have some levels of protection because, my kindred of color, of disability are being targeted.
Yes.
And, it's not enough to just say, well, it's political process. It takes a long time. No.
Yeah, well-
it's like we can wait here until the planet is dead, and because
And all of us along with it.
and all of us along with
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and having had, the worst manifestation of the American empire possible, or
Yeah.
we can say no more.
Yeah.
We're going to resistance doesn't mean like just having an opposition to the Republican Party. I'm
Right.
very disappointed in the state Democratic Party for co-opting symbols of resistance and liberation from communities of color, and then using that as kind of a selling tagline.
Yeah.
Hashtag resistance.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
but are you really? Like,
Yeah.
especially seeing how some of our state electeds, you may have missed this, but they had decided that a bunch of interactions that they had that would have been made public by some new public disclosure laws will be exempt. And, for all the people who talk about, we're more interested in having more transparency in politics. I see very little movement on that front. So this kind of started a period of disillusionment with the party and kind of with the political process.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, party politics has always been,
Yeah. Well, I mean, recently, and this was a few months ago, I even had a city council member who we had endorsed last year,
Right.
who I supported very heavily, and a member of our executive committee tell me that I was I was being seen as anti-union because I had alienated the police union. And it's like,
Yeah.
it took everything in me to not literally get up and walk away from that table.
This is why they call politics the science of the picayune.
It's just like, just because something is a union doesn't mean that it actually
Yeah.
serves people.
Right.
In fact, the police union is that entity that protects police members when they are brutalizing people of color, people who are disabled, people who are mentally ill, people who are trans and queer.
Right.
They are, and also they are the ones who are supporting those police officers to go and bust up other union actions.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if the, honestly, if there is a union I am going to alienate, I'm sorry, I'm kind of okay, if not a little happy that the police union is saying that they're not comfortable with me.
Yeah.
The types of unions that I am much more in awe of are honestly the IWW and the Carpenters Union, because I see them out in the community, trying to create a larger class consciousness of the ways that capitalism is essentially starving us as a community, as a country, and as a class.
Yeah.
And what I've been disappointed in is that I've seen the talk of unions get used to drive people away from folks who would, honestly be better for the community. I remember when Bill Fishburne and E.J. Zeta someone had asked us to remove them from a slate of candidates for endorsement because they weren't sure about their union qualifications, which came down to the Dock Workers Union, which is a union of between 12 and 20 people. And it's this kind of union that's been there for generations, but it's not the majority of people who work at the port. In fact, the majority of people who work at the port are private contractors, because the union has been used as a pawn in the politics of the Port Commission. They keep talking about how, this will be good for the union, this will be good for those 12 to 20 jobs. Meanwhile,
all the
rest of the people working there are working in hazardous conditions. They don't have those protections, and we're putting in we're going to construct another expensive lumber mover, and it's like when we, as a city and as a county, kind of laud ourselves on how environmentally conscious we are.
And it's like, what are we going to move with it?
Yes, exactly. And it's like,
we're out of old growth forests.
Yes, and who's considering how global climate change, which is happening, and it will get worse. When the port is literally flooded and your machines are literally like underwater,
you're going to have a very expensive archaeological site.
Where it's like, how is Bill McGregor, and going to keep those jobs for you? I mean, I know that in Bill's plan there was going to be expansion into green energy. There was going to be usage of port properties to provide affordable housing. These are things that would have given jobs and would have given shelter and housing for people. And that 800 vote shortfall that we had for that race was such a gut check. I mean, that was really heartbreaking. And now seeing Bud Blake is up for election this year. And he backed Gigi McClure, who was an outspoken homophobe and transphobe. At the Kennedy dinner, I was asked to acknowledge her, and I did, because I'm the chair. She's here. They're independents. So I was asked by Bud Blake and some other Democrats to acknowledge her. So I did, because I try to be fair and equitable.
Acknowledge.
But then later, I'm seeing members of her voting base and her husband making such terrible comments about queer people and trans people and misgendering me. And when I reached out publicly to kind of confront that and say, here's what's going on, are you going to say something? All she could say was, well, that's not me, I'm not saying that. And I said, but it's being said in your camp, and your silence, there is no, you can't be silent in the face of oppression.
Exactly.
You cannot be silent in the face of discrimination. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act.
Yeah.
Because when you are silent in situations, you are basically allowing it to continue. And Bud Blake was one of the first supporters and biggest supporters of Gigi McClure. And then at Pride, seeing him
Yeah.
as part of the parade,
Yes.
wearing
Yes.
a rainbow flag and running around,
Yeah.
you know, it's,
Thurston County commissioners did their proclamation of June as Pride Month, you know, just days before
yep.
that. And
Because
yeah.
proclamations, making quick statements like that are so easy.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, and people. I mean, this phenomena that we have now, where people can be out and out white supremacists, out and out bigots, and get, and still maintain political viability, is relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
But in all honesty, like if you need look no further than the city of Olympia to see tons of statements about compassion,
Mm-hmm.
about solidarity. And yet,
Yeah.
time and again, when a circumstance arises for the administration to actually live by those principles that they're signing on to in this nice little photo op statement,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I remember when I started going there, one of the first things I saw was that they signed a statement of solidarity with Standing Rock, and this was back during
Yeah.
when DAPL was still being fought. And later that year, we had the first Olympia stand. And I feel like Standing Rock had been pretty clear that it wasn't just about that pipeline; it was about all pipelines. Was that all of, that this pipeline would be poisoning the land, would be poisoning people, that this process of moving aside any community in its path,
Yeah.
is imperialistic and wrong. And the blockade along the tracks had been to stop fracking sands.
Yeah.
They weren't going to Standing Rock, but they were fracking proppants. They were going to be used for fracking.
Yeah.
And there was something that the city could have done to say, we are going to allow this blockade to happen, whether or not we agree with it, but because the train company came to them and said,
Yeah.
we need this blockade gone. They sent in the cops. And of course it happened again last year with the second, or earlier this year with the second Olympia stand. And there's their statement of compassion for people who are houseless. I haven't heard of the camp sweeps stopping.
Right.
There is some movement now finally, but it is not enough. It is taking so long.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about the houseless as if the reason that people don't feel like coming downtown is all about the houseless people. But it's not that people who are homeless who are making all of those shop fronts empty and are leaving them empty. It's not the Olympia houseless who are leaving their only 2 or 3 public bathrooms that you have to run 3 or 4 blocks for.
I know.
And it's not the homeless people who are leading to the economic situation where we have rents that are pushing people out onto the streets. If anything, it is the unwillingness of the city to put some kind of either vacancy tax on those vacant properties, to put down some measures to control affordable housing.
Yeah.
In fact, honestly, we're seeing 3 or 4 new high-end housing things being put up in downtown.
Yeah.
And if 123 4th Street is any indication, they have studios for rent, which are $1,200 a month.
Yeah.
Now, most people make between $1,800 and $2,000 a month, and that's assuming that you're working a full-time job.
Yeah.
You know, and that's even before your bills
Right.
or any medical expenses you have.
Yeah.
And that's just so exorbitant and to the point of extortion.
Yeah.
You know,
It
and,
is.
and it's all because, you know, the growth of Seattle and Amazon is just pushing people further and further south, and now it's hitting us.
Yeah.
And instead of deciding that we are going to be a bastion of affordable housing and that we are going to specifically target and initiate programs to target local homeowners and renters who have some time and residency here,
Yeah.
we're leaving them to the wolves. So part of why I have resigned has been in that I realized internally that I'm not a politician. I'm an activist.
Yeah.
And while I'm going to remain a PCO of the precinct that I reside in, and I'm going to continue to try and be a voice of the change that is needed within the party, I am going to be stepping down from leadership because I feel like that temperament to kind of weather all of that, all of that,
Yeah.
you know, seeing the other side of people who you think know you and you knew had your back, and seeing how quickly they turn on you because you say something too radical,
Right.
or you seeing people on your own executive committee misgendering me repeatedly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard. And it'll also give me more time to focus on groups that I feel more fulfilled by.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that I can become a little more. I've recently started volunteering at the Thurston County Food Bank, for example. And while that's not really activism per se,
Well, it is. I think
it is because
Yeah.
you know we're like everyone who comes through our doors pretty
Yeah.
much gets food.
Right.
And what excited me about that was that there were very few people who had to be there, like in the sort of
Sure.
a situation where you're working a job and you're being paid terrible wages and you're being asked to do a bunch of things that you don't really want to do, but you have to do it because if you don't, you're going to lose your housing and you're going to not be able to feed yourself, take your medications.
Right.
And instead, just doing something because it's meaningful and because you're helping people. And I got to volunteer in the office and check people in.
Yeah.
And you really get to know people.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing you know, people from all different sorts of walks of life. I helped someone was who was living at the Billy Frank Jr. place, didn't have a car or any way to get their groceries back to their house, and so they asked me if I would be willing to walk with them from the bank to there just to get it in there. And I said, sure, I don't really, you know, Sure. And, you know, being able to make a real difference in a person's life.
Sometimes direct service is the most effective kind of activism.
Yeah.
I find.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, when I've been at camp cleanups, when I have been volunteering at shelters, you know, honestly, our local houseless community, just like any community, there's always going to be people who.
Sure.
But overall, honestly, they're some of the most vibrant, compassionate, patient people I have ever met.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
for one of the first things I had to kind of get over when I was getting involved was that I would be offered something like a sandwich or a cigarette or coffee by someone who, you know, has less than I, and I had to kind of get over myself and say yes, that they can do that, because as human beings, I feel our natural state, honestly, is to care about each other. I think that the problems of capitalism has made us sick in that we remove ourselves from that because it becomes a weakness, because it becomes something that it's now exploitable, commodifiable.
Yeah.
You know, being able to just be present with people and help them directly and in a very real way, not just in a, oh, I'm praying for you, or oh, we're going to get this
Thoughts and
person in
prayers.
office. And even though they won't be in a majority, like they'll have a voice and they can talk about and they'll listen to your issues. It's like, no, you have a need. Are you hungry? Let me feed you. Do you need a coat? We have a coat. You know, the direct activism, I think, right now, mutual aid, solidarity, community building through these direct means. That is the way I see for myself moving forward. And I hope that even though I'm not going to be at the helm of the party, I hope to see that the Democrats Thurston County Democrats who voted for me will follow me in that direction as well.
So sounds like you'll have some more time to devote to being a writer.
Yes. I actually, I have been having more time to write. A lot of my writing has been, over the last several years, has been very political. I feel like as writers, as any artist, you know, our job is to reveal the truth.
Right.
And I feel that words have a special way to convey truth. Even when it's not directly stated as such. I'm mainly a poet. I've tried for years to write fiction, even like just short stories, and I'll have these wonderful ideas, I have these great characters, and then it just kind of, you know, getting that last 2/5 of the story just for me is the hardest. Because I feel almost like it's like, how do I put an end to something that I want to stay
Wrapping up all
inside
those
of?
plot lines. Is,
I want to. And life doesn't really work that way. You know, they're like, you know, the book says the end, but the characters continue on. You know, the wedding is over, and so now, you know, the happy couple moves into the palace, and everything's great. But then, you know, how long until they start to squabble over the silly things that you know we all do? So I feel like poetry is something that, you know, is really not it's not so much a beginning and an end.
Right.
It's a moment. It's like a frozen in time sort of thing. And being able to, when I write, I tend to do it mainly. What is that term? Stream of consciousness. You know, for me, for me, writing is like this weird energy. Like I have something going on inside, and if I don't get it out, like I'm going to like lose my mind.
Exactly.
More than it already has been lost. For a long time, I honestly didn't even really consider myself a writer. I've always loved words. I began reading when I was. I've been reading as long as I can remember, and you know, and I started into chapter books at a very young age. But I always really loved short stories. I didn't read short stories just because that was what my attention span was. It was because I really liked that in a short story you could get right to the meat of a story relatively quickly. And especially when it comes to one of my favorite genres of fiction and art period is horror. You know, in a short story you can, I feel like too often in horror novels and in movies, we see so much time being wasted, and really to give a good scare, you don't need a lot of time. I'm very influenced by. I read everything that Lovecraft wrote, so a lot of my narrative fiction tends to fall into really weird fiction. But when I'm writing, I tend to be thinking about like an issue that I see. One of the first poems I read publicly was actually at Olympia City Council. There was this poem I wrote called "The Downtown Strategy." At the time, this was back when Just Housing was pushing the Legalized Survival campaign, and I remember one of the city councilors would always pivot. You know, to say that, well, the community needs to take responsibility for, you know, step up and take responsibility for this houselessness issue. We're already doing X, Y, and Z. And, we're really excited. We need to focus on the downtown strategy because that's going to bring in all this money and jobs and housing, which is, I don't know,
Right,
but
yeah.
look around at how well is that
Yeah,
going.
exactly.
It's at least a few years old now.
Yeah.
And it struck me how they were talking about the opportunity and the glamour of the downtown strategy while, completely ignoring the beauty and the spirit of houseless people. Like that,
Yeah.
they were. I would be in several city council meetings where people got to say terrible things about houseless people, like that they're roaches, that they're all drug addicts, insert terrible stereotype here, and they were saying it, and it was being allowed by our mayor Cheryl Selby, even protected people,
Right.
and so that got me thinking, and then I had a conversation on the bus with someone who I'd seen out on the streets. I had just simply stated, "Man, the leaves are really beautiful this time of year," and it launched into this very long and beautiful conversation, and I really feel like they for the time we were on the bus together, they really opened their heart to me, and that really stuck with me. And so I wrote, the poem is really just about, that your idea of what is beautiful is very dead. It's very dry. It's all has to do with, what is in a shopping mall. It is entirely commercialized.
Yeah.
And to me, that's ugly. That's scary. When you have nowhere to hide yourself because you're living, you have to wear all the folds of your heart and soul on your sleeve.
Yeah.
And I think, and I see a lot of beauty in that. I talk a lot about the compassion and the kindness that I see in our local houseless community. And so that's basically that contrast of what you talk about as far as beauty and strategy and vibrancy. That was a big word, vibrancy.
Yes.
It's very different from my sense of vibrancy.
I imagine that provides a lot of inspiration for what you write about.
Yes.
And did you have something you wanted to read for us?
Yes. All right. So if I may.
Yeah, for our viewers, please share that.
What I'm going to read is a poem called L'Étoile Noire, which in French means the black star. L'Étoile Noire. It's a dim morning as the grayed woman washes the muddied blood from her calloused hands. The twilight dawn's cold light shining bitterly on the murky river slathered with haze. The rusted silt dilutes to white, but between her pale fingers, pallid eyes lifted to stare back at the frigid flare of the onyx star fixed in obscure sky. The witch clucks her tongue in thought, wading back to the shore where the remains of the night lay strewn, fall out on the gore-besotted ground. The mandragon's head bobbles against the rocks in the water, an apple pulled cleanly off the branch in a crisp twist, snap. As she rinses the crown wrested from its unfit locks, soaked with brackened mud water, she remembers and ponders whether the young girl had truly meant what she had said hours before at the moon-washed crossroads. Or was it something she had inadvertently made happen with her mind? How could she have said something so cruelly affirming? Was the memory real, or a delusive fancy? She tosses the crown to the pile of leather and metal on the shore, clattering against the erring vorpal blade. If she found her again, would the girl remember the words of their parting? Those green eyes had lied when she claimed to understand why the witch had to fight. Could a child truly understand what it means to sacrifice their strength to the cause, to take up the scapegoat's banner? She makes it onto the shore and ruminantly lights the altar's ring of pitch-dipped torches. Why is it that no one can just be honest and break your heart? Instead, it's a tiny slice, an accidental thrust with an extended drip of burning wax, descending the shaft of a slow-burning candle. The candle lights flicker. Carefully, she sets the crown the head, and the sword in the encircled pentagrams. Knees creak as she prostrates onto cool ground. Finally, the moment ripens to total effulgence. It was done, and now she had no meaning. She wept, the clouds parted, and her eyes salted the dirt under that lightless star, never setting, never moving, solely watching.
Thank you. That was very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what this poem for me was about, when I wrote it, I had moved on from a job where I had been routinely misgendered at work, because there was a job that I transitioned in. And I was working a new job where I was a program manager. I had a very high salaried position. I was a chair of the Thurston County Democrats. And I was involved with tons of local projects. And at the end of it all, as everything kind of continued on, I got this sense of what happens when it's all done. Mm-hmm. And also now that I've accomplished all of this, what's left? For me, the witch is a character who has taken on a fight, and she's won it. She's beheaded the Kyriarch, the enemy, and now is kind of doing the final things to seal it all away forever.
Right.
And she has dedicated her life to this. This is, there are many broken bodies, lives, and communities in her wake. She has given of herself, and many people have given of themselves as well.
Right.
And she's, but now, as once it's done, then you have no meaning. And I definitely had that sense. Right. That why had I done all this?
Right.
And I feel like this is a good point to kind of transition to maybe talking about what brought me into the ward that I was in, where I know that your viewers probably can't see this, but I got my first tattoo. It is acceptance is giving up hope of a better past. It's not finished. It needs to be colored in, and I need to have some blue around the border.
Right.
But I recently almost became a statistic.
Right.
I attempted suicide, and I went into, and I guess maybe it's a little late now, but trigger warning, I'm going to be talking very frankly about it.
Right.
And so I went into the hospital, and what brought me there was many things. Kind of this feeling of what did I really accomplish? Mm-hmm. And now that I was here, getting so wrapped up in the position and the workings of the party, and being so removed, I felt, from the actual class struggle, because as people were only too happy to tell me, well, Boudicca, we really need to be focusing on how we're going to get big donors to give us money, because raising money for political candidates, that's what it's about. And then losing, I had a partner of 7 years, and the relationship with me to put me into homelessness.
Right.
I was going from couch to couch, sleeping in my car, storing my things in different places.
Right.
I felt like I honestly felt like my functionality was gone. Sure. I could only plan at most 24 hours ahead. Yeah. I couldn't tell what day of the week it was without looking at my phone.
Yeah.
There was no sense of normalcy.
Right.
And it got to this point where, I would be lying if I said that suicide isn't something that's followed me throughout my life.
Sure.
And this is a conversation that's kind of been brought up with the passing of Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, which is that, When people commit suicide, it's like if someone dies of a heart attack, we're always like, oh well, it's so. Well, let's remember their life and give them a proper memoriam. And then
Right.
if you commit suicide, it's a tragedy.
Right.
And if you live with suicide, it's something that you struggle with throughout your life.
Oh yeah.
And even though I have been hospitalized and I do have a treatment plan, I have medications I'm on now, I have diagnoses that have given me a context for my life that I can understand
Yeah.
the things that brought me here, it is still something that I am struggling with and will be struggling with. And I know if Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain were like me, if Robin Williams was like me, this is something that, getting just to 30 is
Yeah.
an achievement.
Yeah.
Like my first time that I wanted to die was when I was about 13 or 14. And also when my first attempt was, and it's so Anthony Bourdain getting to 61, that was an achievement.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I feel like we look at, well, how many more years could they have lived, and it's like, if they've been cut short of pancreatic cancer, you'd be kind of an asshole to say how many more years could they have had. It's like,
Right. Yeah.
mental illness is as real,
Yeah.
and it is as
It's as much of a natural cause of death as anything else.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's in a lot of my writing, I found recently, I've been talking very frankly about it. I think that not all that it is dark is evil, and living with mental illness is not living your life running from it. Right. Living with mental illness is entering a period where you understand it and you can contemplate it and you are able to exist with it in a way where it is not controlling you and you aren't really controlling it.
Yeah. So I don't want to, rush us through this, but we are getting a little short on time. So I'd just like to end up by saying, so with all of this that you have experienced lately, where do you feel you're going to go from here, and what would you like to leave our viewers with as a
I'm wanting to get more into my writing. I'm wanting to stay involved with the Thurston County Food Bank. I want to get re-involved in Just Housing. There's also this other advocacy group called At Home, which is another local group. They've been putting together kits of hygiene supplies, first aid kits for local houseless people. And they definitely are very keyed into the idea of like, what can we do right now to reduce harm and to give immediate aid to people who need it. And so I'm going to be having more time to do that. Right now, I'm kind of in a reestablishing my life kind of phase, but I am looking forward to that. If there's something that I could leave with all of you, what I think I would leave you all with is that don't give up. It is going to be hard. And even if you do decide that you need to, I will understand. Like, the world is become a perilous place. And it is more important now than ever that we are having these important conversations about how can we create the kind of intersectional struggle, intersectional resistance that is going to not only overthrow this oppression, but also liberate ourselves and our communities. And these are the sorts of things that we need to be doing now because time is running out. It has already run out for so many of my trans and not kindred and so many other communities are already feeling the heel of American fascism. And we can make this better we can stop this, but it's going to take all of us. So whatever it's going to take in you to commit to this struggle alongside of me and all the other people who are already invested in this struggle, I urge you to please do it, because we're either all going to survive this or we're all going to suffer.
All right. Boudicca Walsh, radical trans witch and writer, thank you so much for being with us on the show, and thank you for joining us on Tea Time in Olympia. Have a good night.